When we're talking about autism, well, when I'm presenting it today, I'm speaking from the neurodiversity affirming paradigm, which means we're just considering autism as another neurotype. It means it's a different way of neurotypical processing of the world and engaging with the world and communicating.
I'm grateful to have this dialogue with today's speaker. It is a month to show people that we care, people that have different communication styles, different way of thinking, different thought processes, so we can look at different way of thinking through different lens. Emma is a passionate late diagnosed neurodivergent occupational therapist and mother of two. Emma brings experience of supporting individuals and communities across the lifespan and global context. Welcome to Global Educators. I'm your host, BYKE, and you're speaking to Emma right now.
Hi, BYKE. Thank you so much for having me on your fantastic podcast. I love the term anything unconventional and different, and I think that kind of leads us perfectly into our conversation today. Thank you for introducing me. I am Emma, and while I am speaking today on neurodivergence, I just want to disclose that I am not autistic, and so it's really important that the message I'm sharing as an ally, but I cannot speak from lived experience. And I speak on behalf of the autistic community, where I gain much of my research from autistic adults with lived experience. And so I am neurodivergent, but I am not able to identify with the autistic lived experience.
That's amazing. Let's introduce what autism spectrum is for people who are not maybe familiar with the term.
I think it's a really lovely way to frame this conversation, just coming out of April, which was Autism and Neurodivergence Awareness Month. I think that we need to move from awareness to acceptance. And really, what does acceptance mean? It's not just saying, oh, of course I accept everyone. What does it actually look like in practice? And so when we're understanding autism spectrum disorder, as you mentioned, and this is the name it is given in the official diagnostic manual, of which is sort of the best we have in the medical world, but it is a problematic manual for many reasons, because it takes a very pathologized, deficit-based view of autism. And unfortunately, this is how much of society understands and knows autism, this problem with social interactions, words like rigid or fixed or getting stuck or repetitive. They're all really negatively connotated words. And so when we're talking about autism, when I'm presenting it today, I'm speaking from the neurodiversity affirming paradigm, which means we're just considering autism as another neurotype. And it means it's a different way of neurotypical processing of the world and engaging with the world and communicating, and maybe your motor functioning with the world and sensory profile, but it is no less and no more, it is a different neurotype. A lot of people also have the sort of very limited or linear understanding of autism. For example, words like high functioning or low functioning, or mild or moderate or severe autism. I think that doesn't explain the full experience of any human being, and also what a term to be labeled as high functioning, because very often when one is quote unquote high functioning, there is a lot of masking, and we can get into this later, that a person is actually doing in order to appear neurotypical, essentially. And so when we're looking at autism, I prefer to use a sort of spherical, and this is not my own research. This is the preferred understanding of autism from the community. I'm referring to the autistic community, would be the spherical model. So we're looking at a person's sensory processing, as I mentioned, their motor functioning, their perceptions, their social and communication engagement, as well as their executive function. What else am I forgetting? Basically, we're looking at the person holistically. Now, everyone is going to plot incredibly differently on this spherical diagram. And so they might be incredibly strong in aspects of pattern recognition, but football or being able to kick a ball is really challenging. And so we're challenging the idea that the spectrum is linear, and the spectrum is rather presenting a unique holistic person. And this lovely saying goes, one autistic person, one autistic person. just like no human being can be the same.
Nobody has put those ideas into words like you have. So thank you. Just a disclaimer, I am nowhere perfect, nowhere being perfect. I am learning a lot from having
Yola.
conversations with my guest speakers. So this platform, I'm also learning a lot. So let's talk about some social nuances or societal expectations that someone with autism might struggle with.
Another disclaimer I should have said in the beginning. When I am referring to autistic folk, I'm using identity first language as opposed to person first language. And this is because, as I mentioned, I'm drawing from lived experience of autistic adults who say that autism is something that cannot be separated from their identity. And so excluding it, saying person with autism sounds as if it's like a condition or an illness or something that is separate from them. And if we're taking ownership of the identity, we respect autistic people, autistic persons. So just a note around my language use with that. Social engagement and communication is such a fascinating area if you really think about it. There's almost this like set of rules that somebody made up, and people are expected to adhere to these rules. And for some people, these rules might come more naturally and feel more intuitive. And for others, these rules can feel completely absurd and abstract and often contradictory. And then you throw in, cultural expectations that come with different societies. I've just got back from a trip to Japan, and, there were so many different cultural nuances in terms of how people come across socially. I kept thinking, where are the neurodivergent people when I was on the trains? And so what happens is, unfortunately, for many neurodivergent people, autistic people especially, is that their style of engaging with the world on a social or communication level is deemed as unfit or mismatched or inappropriate. Whereas, as I mentioned before, it is just different. So the example of back and forth conversations or, small talk, that can feel really unnatural for a lot of people. Whereas for a lot of autistic people, and I'm generalizing here, being able to share about your special interest, quote unquote info dump for a long time actually might make you feel really comfortable and more connected to another person. But some people from a neurotypical perspective might see this as inappropriate and weird. The same concept with eye contact. We have this, and I'm speaking, I suppose, from a Western perspective here, but this concept of, you make eye contact with a person when you talk, and then, you don't look for too long, you look away a little bit, but, that is also incredibly uncomfortable for a lot of neurodivergent people. And so it's really about challenging these social norms that exist and saying, well, hang on, the onus is not only on neurodivergent people to adapt the way they communicate and socialize. We, as a society, need to be seeing things from multiple perspectives and saying, hang on, maybe small talk isn't the best way for everyone. And how can I be open to everyone's style?
What are some direct, unambiguous ways we should be connecting?
I love a lot of autistic advocates I follow have got a disclaimer they give before they start a conversation. And very often this can be quite helpful in like the workplace. For example, saying, look, I just want to let you know, I am quite a direct communicator. Some people interpret that as me being snappy or rude. It really is not intended at all. Please let me know if you ever feel like I'm communicating in a way that doesn't feel comfortable for you, but just know I get to the point and I'm quite matter of fact. That sort of just quick conversation, while it's unfortunate that the onus needs to be on the autistic individual to disclaim, it can help a person have so much more awareness and empathy. And hang on, okay, I don't need to take this personally. This is just how we communicate, and also maybe helps the other person to feel more safe and comfortable with their own communication style. Is that kind of answering your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's really helpful. The people that we talk to every day, it's just, inevitable to have a little bit of friction. So even for our younger audience who are listening, if you feel offended, don't be scared to speak up. If you feel like it's too much, you can write an email or
Yeah, that's
write
a lovely.
email to your teacher like I felt offended, and then we can hash it out and talk about it. Because I personally think I'm just an optimist. I think most parents or teachers are not we're not intentionally saying things to think like, okay, I'm gonna hurt his feelings. no teacher's gonna wake up out of their bed. Today, my goal is to hurt people's feelings. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of like, these misunderstandings happen. So, if we can both kind of, I think best way is just talking it out, over communicating.
Absolutely. And for some people, I love that you brought up email because for some people, verbal spoken communication can feel really, really intense. When we're in a state of fight, flight, freeze, fear, fawn, we're often not fully online with our prefrontal cortex. Therefore, it's really hard for us to maybe come across in the way that we would best want when we're our most regulated selves. Therefore, a lot of people actually do prefer to write out their message first. So an email can be a fabulous way to sort of say, look, I'd like to have a conversation with you. This is kind of what I want to go over. I'm letting you know in advance so that if I do get a little bit overwhelmed or tongue-tied in our conversation, just so you are aware. For this is just an example of an accommodation one could use in many contexts, such as work or school.
Can you describe a time you successfully helped someone with their communicational needs?
Well, I suppose I just described this. So I was supporting a young student, an adolescent, and she was really uncomfortable with approaching teachers, and this can be a really hard ask for a lot of people. That skill of self-advocacy, being able to go up to a teacher and say, "I'm confused," or "I don't know what's going on," or "Can you explain this to me again?" A lot of people are under the impression that it might make them come across as maybe not smart or not knowing what's going on. Whereas it's quite often the opposite, I believe, for teachers, because they're actually rather, oh, this child is so motivated and dedicated to their learning that they're willing to say when they don't know what's going on. And so this particular student felt more comfortable with written message format. And so we did a lot of coaching around how she could respectfully and politely speak to her teachers when she wanted to ask a question about how the assignment was meant to be submitted, or and reminding her it would not reflect poorly on her grades and actually could really help her if and when she wanted to get to the point that she would want to approach them verbally, or maybe not.
And for my younger audience, listening, like we love receiving questions, to be honest. Uh, we might snap, I guess teachers might snap because we're all still humans. Maybe we had a bad day in traffic or like, but that's not an excuse. It's not an excuse for teachers to yell or raise their voice at students. No. Could you give us like a small example of a difference between being this complainer, like versus actually speaking up for yourself?
I would suggest that all behavior is communication. So, what might seem like complaining outwardly is indicating something going on for the individual, a need, an unmet need. And so, really, I think this is where, we're often so quick to take communication and behavior at face value and not pause and regulate ourselves and say, okay, what could be going on for this person that they're really trying to convey? And so, almost trying to read the subtext or the message beyond the complaint and saying, maybe after class or over a message or email, I noticed you've been saying this a lot lately, and I'm wondering if there's something going on. Extending that empathetic curiosity can make the world of difference as opposed to sort of addressing what's just on the surface.
Thank you. That is lovely. Let's move away from the younger audience to an older. Sorry if my podcasts are confusing. Let's move to an older audience. Specifically people that are working,
Mhm.
25 and up. How can we handle miscommunication? So
I love that you asked that, and I totally agree. I think children are incredibly tolerant. We actually don't give them enough credit, and I think adults we do all naturally become quite fixed and set in our unique ways. Um, I don't know that there's a perfect formula or recipe or answer for this, but I think this is why I'm so very passionate about conversations around neurodivergence, because it's just the message, the elevator pitch, the one line summary is it's just allowing people to be different and being okay with the fact that we're all different. And if we can actualize that, then it transcends, I believe, into every overlapping, intersecting identity. And I love what you said, to always assume positive intent. I don't think people wake up with ill intent, and I don't think many people do plan to go out and bash heads with others. I think that we're living, as you mentioned, in a very complex time where we all do have so many different ways of engaging with the world. And as I mentioned, these are intersectional identities. And so they're part of what make us who we are. And so if we are able to extend the empathy to others, that I might not have the same experience as you, but I am curious and I am open to your experience, I think that it disarms people then. Um, yeah, lead with curiosity.
What are some tools for people with autism?
I love this question because I think so much of understanding oneself, post getting an autism diagnosis, or whether you don't officially get one and you sort of go through a process of self-diagnosis, which is completely valid, is the process of understanding who you are and what you need to be successful and to be able to access your days. And so I would really encourage people, and perhaps I could share some links with you from some preferred neurodiversity affirming sites, depict autism from a very strengths-based lens. And so that's not to say that it's sugar-coated and rose-tinted and to say that there aren't challenges that come with autistic lived experience. But it's to say that if we only draw from these very outdated negative deficit-based models, then how are we able to take ownership in that autistic identity and move beyond the stigma that is not helpful for anyone? And so I would say, learning about your sensory preferences, for example, what sensations in my sensory world, and there are 8 different sensory systems that we know of, what dysregulates me? What arouses me and makes me energized for the day? What helps me to downregulate when I need to kind of focus and get back into the zone? Understanding your executive function profile. Are you incredible at getting into a state of flow, but actually getting to the point of starting the task can be really, really challenging for you, or switching to a task that you don't really want to get into? Identifying the ways that you engage with the world on an invisible level can be a total game changer with how you organize your life and the scaffolds you set up. The same goes with if there are any, I think one of the most wonderful things about therapy for anyone, and especially autistic folk, is finding out your special interests. And those are these interests, these deep, strong passions that autistic folk most often have. And it's incredible. If you ever engage an autistic person on one of their special interests, you will see a transformation happen before your eyes. And I believe this is where therapy needs to live. And it's not about dangling it as a reward. It's about using that, well, not using, but incorporating that individual special interest into therapy and into giving them energy in life. Whether that special interest is super niche and quote unquote weird, or that is socially appropriate, as it sometimes is with young girls, which is why so many young girls are missed in autism diagnoses. Getting in touch with your special interests, carving out time and making time for those as a way to replenish your reserves. Oh gosh, the list goes on, but I would really encourage people to get in touch with their identities and what makes them them without shame or judgment of self, because there's so much of that. We know that. I'll share some resources with you.
Self-judgment and self-flagellation can be one of our biggest weapon that we hurting ourselves, right? I feel like one way that neurodivergent might be hurt themselves is masking and not telling people, okay, I need, a different way of communication than you, not speaking up or hiding your needs. What are the negative consequences for masking and hiding your true identity?
Unfortunately, the long-term mental health outcomes of autistic and neurodivergent folk are far worse than the neurotypical population. In anxiety and depression, suicidality. In fact, the lifespan of autistic folk is shorter than neurotypical folk. So we know that masking or living in a neurotypical world has a detrimental effect on autistic people's life experience. And so, the feeling of when you've gone to an occasion or a space where you don't know everyone, and you have to put on this quite literally a mask of a smile and this, pain in your face, and you need to make small talk, and you come home after the event and you feel that sort of that like complete like utter exhaustion. Now that's, a small example some people can relate to. For a lot of individuals, that can be what life is like, constantly needing to. I've heard a lot of autistic adults speak about how they used to write scripts for themselves as kids on how to make conversations not sound weird. And they would have to practice and train and how to remind themselves to come across as normal and not talk about their interests too much. And if a person's eyes start looking away, it means they might be getting bored of what I'm saying. So how to, and that's just, it's completely heartbreaking, but it happens. And so you can imagine if you've lived your life feeling like the world is not made for you and you need to make yourself more likable and more appropriate for the world, how incredibly impactful that must be on your experience and well-being.
Trying to be liked by everyone is impossible.
Absolutely.
Have to accept our true identity and really own when you have certain needs, right? You just have to own it, express it. If someone does not accept you, what should someone do?
I mean, I think that it's exactly what you said. I think we can't make everyone happy. That's not possible. And also it's not our jobs to make everyone happy. And I think that, you have to look at the relationships that that are, part of your everyday world, whether it's your work relationships and your family relationships and your community relationships, and the ones that are worth working through. We can use these accommodations and these tools to make these relationships more successful and meaningful for both parties. But in terms of trying to get everyone's approval and everyone's acceptance, nah, it's not possible. So letting go of that.
Yes. So, thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. What is your one final message to anyone listening?
I think if you've ever felt different, probably the world has given you these subtle reminders throughout your journey that, there's something different or strange or weird about you. And probably you've internalized those and that's become your inner dialogue. And I would just say, if anything you can do just to be kind to yourself. Extend the kindness to yourself that you do to others, because often we are harshest to ourselves. And I think that if we can just practice more kindness towards ourselves, how much better we can be as functioning members of society.
Where can we find you?
Sure. You could look at my site, which is neuroniche.org, and I'm providing virtual coaching and consultation services for families, individuals, and organizations looking to become more neurodiversity affirming in how we support neurodivergent folk. As we know, the latest statistic is 1 in 5 individuals are neurodivergent. So it's an undeniable fact of our population.
Are you specifically targeting a country, or is this available for global
This is
for
available for
worldwide?
global users. And that's why I pitch my services in a coaching consultation model, because as an occupational therapist, I am not registered with every health professions council in every country. So by offering coaching and consultation, I can be of support across the globe.
Thank you, Emma. We'll add all of her details in the caption. Make sure to reach out to her if you are in need of a therapist. See you in my next video.